through a standard way to interact with the Bacalhau network. We'll start with our given scenario, which is pretty straightforward. It's just a single deployment of an application, but deployed across many zones. Now, each of these VMs is going to be pretty straightforward. We'll log in here to a single VM and list the logs on that VM. Each VM is producing a whole series of logs right now, and they're being rotated into this directory called logs to process. So when we list this, you can see all of our various logs here, all the various applications that are being generated. And if we then go and look inside those logs, we can see a whole bunch of information that is useful, but is on the node itself, and it's up to us to figure out what we want to do with it. In this case, the stuff that we see as useful is these security warnings. We want to capture those and put those into either our own files and filter them, or we want to move them into a central cluster so that we can take quicker action on them. Now, of course, it's not just one machine that we're running on. It's in fact many, many machines. In this case, we're running on machines, one per zone across all of Google Cloud. This totals about 112 different machines. And while processing on one machine would be quite straightforward, doing it across all 112 machines would be significantly more challenging. So this is where Bacalhau steps in. Bacalhau has an agent running on each of these nodes. Setting up and running this is very straightforward. But for us, running this is running the job once that agent is there is as simple as running using Docker. In this case, we'll do an example of just running on one zone in on one machine in one zone, and we'll run hello world on that single machine just to show you how it works by default. And off we go. So I hit this, I run it, the job goes out, it finds the node to run on, schedules it, and runs. And then in the results, you can see here that I have selected the one zone in which to run on using the zone selector in a particular one. And then you can see it outputted the hello world there in the middle. Now, what if I wanted to run that same command but on 112 different nodes, one for each node in the network? Well, it's just adding a concurrency flag to the command, and now I'm executing on every single node in the network. Here you can see I'm doing the same hello world. I run the same job, and in under 4 seconds, it is now scheduled and run on every single node in the network. When we look at the output here, you can see many, many outputs, one for each one of the individual nodes, each one having executing that hello world. Okay, well, and just to show you nothing up our sleeve, when I do grep on the number of job IDs that I just ran, you can see it is 112. The additional one there is for the header line. Okay, so that's great. That's just a hello world. Let's actually do something functional here. Instead, what we want to do is we want to use DuckDB to layer over the top of our log files and run on a single node and collect information about those log files. So here you can see we're using the zone selector to run. We're running a single command, Python, and a script that we have written. We're going to run that over that log file that we generated earlier, and we're going to use a select statement, just like you would in any central cluster, using DuckDB. So to run that, it's super straightforward. I simply cat that job definition file into Bacalhau and run it. And in just a few seconds, it's going to go out, find that node, run it, and produce the query. And then when I go to describe the results, you can see me doing that here, and you can see some of the output. This is just a brief summary of the overall output. If I wanted to get the further details of the job, I can go and get that same function, or I can get that same ID and get it, and then I'll download the actual outputs. Here, I downloaded it into my local directory. When I look inside there, you can see I outputted both the standard out, standard error, and any files that were associated. And here's that filtered query with the information inside. Okay, again, very straightforward, not much harder to do than if you were doing it locally. But now what if I wanted to do that same command, but instead on 112 different nodes across the network? Here you can see that I have expanded and I've set that concurrency flag again to, instead of running on one, to now run on 112, but everything else about this is the same. When I do cat job multi-zone into Bacalhau create, again, it hands it off to the network and begins running it. And just a few seconds later, it is done. And it has run on every single node in the network and produced the same results that I was looking for earlier. When I go and I get the describe out of it, you can see I have produced many, many outputs, one for each node in the network. And in this case, I didn't just produce this output for me to download, but I also used Google Cloud Storage to move those outputs through Bacalhau into buckets, one per node. You can see them here. If I grab a random one and run it and look inside that storage bucket, you can see the outputs of what I just produced, which would be that filtered JSON file. And we can look inside that. But I've also moved them all into a global storage bucket. You can see that here, where you're going to see one upload for each one of the files and nodes that we just ran on. And then we can see that if we grab any random one of these files, we can see the results of the URLs having been uploaded to the bucket and contains the content, which is just the security information from those logs. So in a single command, using the Bacalhau network to provide global networking, we are able to demonstrate the power of running cross-zone, no more complicated than running against a single machine or a single zone.